Hello everyone, before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching that way. YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, one of those places where everyone knows your name, your business, and your family history. 3 generations back, it was 1976, and I had just turned 17. My world revolved around school, church, and the occasional drive-in movie with my best friend Ellie. My father ran a modest hardware store on Main Street, and my mother was the type of woman who ironed pillowcases and insisted on saying grace before every meal, even at breakfast. It was a quiet, predictable life. That was until I got involved with Caleb Turner. Caleb was the son of Judge Raymond Turner, the kind of man who walked into a room and silence followed him. Everyone in town either feared or respected him. Caleb, though, wasn't like his father. He was charming in a way that made girls forget their upbringing. He had this lazy smile, sun-bleached hair, and a way of talking that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. We started seeing each other in secret that summer. I didn't tell anyone, not even Ellie, mostly because I knew what people would say, that I wasn't good enough for him. When I found out I was pregnant, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, holding a drugstore test. I'd bought 2 towns over just to avoid being recognized. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. Caleb was the first person I told. I was scared, sure, but part of me believed he'd take care of it, that we'd figure it out together. He didn't say much at first, just sat there, staring at the floor, biting the inside of his cheek the next day. He came back and told me his family would take care of everything I didn't know. Then just how literal he meant that within a week, everything in my life changed. My parents were told I'd had a breakdown, that's the word they used, breakdown. I was suddenly unwell, and it would be best if I stayed somewhere quiet to recover. They sent me to stay with some distant cousin of my mother's in a run-down farmhouse nearly 50 miles away. No phone, no car, no way to contact anyone. My father didn't even drive me there. Caleb's uncle did. He didn't say a word during the entire ride. I remember staring out the window the whole way, watching the trees blur past and feeling like I was being erased. The farmhouse was old and smelled like dust and mothballs. The woman I was sent to stay with, Aunt Margaret, though I'd never met her before, was in her late 60s, wore orthopedic shoes, and always kept her curtains drawn. She never asked questions, never offered comfort. Her house had no television, no radio, and the only books were religious pamphlets and an old Bible with pages so thin they crinkled when you touched them. I spent most of my days staring out the back window, watching the empty fields shift with the wind, waiting for anything to happen. It was like time had stopped at night. I'd lie awake and listen to the sounds of the old house, wood, creaking wind, slipping through cracks, distant coyotes. I wasn't allowed to go into town. Aunt Margaret said it was for the best. I had no idea what people back home were being told. Ellie never wrote, neither did my parents. Weeks went by, then months. My belly grew, and with it the silence around me. I felt like a ghost trapped in someone else's story. Sometimes I'd talk to the baby, just to hear my own voice. I remember whispering, "I don't know what they're doing to us, but I promise I'll get you out." Then one morning, I heard voices outside. I peeked through the front window and saw Judge Turner's black Buick parked in the dirt driveway, dust still swirling around the tires. He didn't come in. Instead, he spoke with Aunt Margaret on the porch, low and calm. She kept nodding, eyes fixed on the ground after he left. She brought me a suitcase and said I needed to pack. They found a better place, she said. No details, no answers. I asked where we were going. She didn't answer, just pointed to the suitcase and walked out of the room that night. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking, what if I disappeared completely? The next day, Caleb showed up. It was the first time I'd seen him in months. He looked thinner, paler, like he hadn't been sleeping either. But he wouldn't look me in the eye. He just stood by the door, while Aunt Margaret handed him the suitcase. Then he muttered something about a clinic in Ohio, and that they would pay for everything I told him. I didn't want to go anywhere. I begged him to tell my parents the truth. That's when he finally snapped. Said it was too late for all that. That things had already been handled. I didn't know what that meant exactly. But the way he said it chilled me to the bone. I didn't go to the clinic that night while Aunt Margaret was asleep. I grabbed the suitcase she packed for me and snuck out the back door. I walked for what felt like hours, following the road with nothing but the moonlight and the sound of gravel crunching under my shoes. Eventually, I found a gas station with a payphone. I had no money, but the clerk, this skinny kid with long hair and a kind face, let me make a call. I dialed the only number I could remember by heart. Ellie's. When she picked up, I barely got the words out. All I said was, "It's me, I need help." Ellie showed up 6 hours later, driving her brother's beat-up Chevy Nova. When she saw me, she burst into tears. She told me everyone thought I'd been committed to some private facility out west, that my parents had been told not to visit, and that I'd asked for space. Caleb apparently had gone back to school like nothing happened. I stayed with Ellie and her family for a few weeks, hidden in the basement. Her parents were quiet about it, but I could tell they knew something wasn't right. They never asked questions. They just let me stay. Eventually, I found a women's shelter in Louisville that helped girls like me. I gave birth there to a little girl with a head full of dark hair. I named her Hope. It wasn't until years later that I found out the full story. One of Caleb's cousins, drunk at a wedding, told someone what had really happened. How the Turners had fabricated a mental breakdown, falsified medical papers, and even paid off a doctor to back it all up. They'd planned to handle it quietly, send me away, give the baby up without my consent, and pretend I never existed. I was just a liability to them, an inconvenience. I never saw Caleb again. Last I heard, he became a lawyer, like his father. I changed my name, moved out of Kentucky, and raised Hope on my own. She's in college now, smart, strong, and full of fire. She doesn't know the whole story yet. One day, I'll tell her, but not because I want her to feel sorry for me. I'll tell her so she knows how far some people will go to protect power, and how far you have to go to protect yourself. To this day, there are folks back in that town who still think I had some kind of breakdown. Maybe that's for the best. Let them think I disappeared. The truth is, I survived. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't believe in ghosts, witches, or backwoods. Cults, or at least I didn't. I'm 28. I live alone in a rental house in Jackson, Mississippi. And until a few weeks ago, my biggest worries were rent and a weird noise my car makes in reverse. I like hiking on weekends, mostly to clear my head. A few friends, and all people I've known since college, planned a trip out to a wooded area about an hour and a half east of Jackson. It's public land, not marked as anything special, just quiet and remote. It was me, Jordan, Will, and Rachel. Nothing fancy, just a day hike with snacks, photos, and no cell service. I wish we'd turned around the second we saw that first cross. We'd wandered off trail, which we tend to do when the marked paths get boring. That's when Rachel noticed what looked like an animal's skull nailed to a tree. At first, we thought it was part of someone's weird hunting ritual, or some kind of southern folk art. But then we started noticing more things. Dozens of handmade wooden crosses stuck crooked into the ground, strips of dirty clothing tied to low-hanging branches. Some items were really old, almost rotted. There were little cloth dolls too, and what looked like melted candles stuck in the dirt. The whole area had this heavy, quiet feel to it, like the trees were pressing in. We didn't say it out loud, but we were all creeped out. I took a bunch of photos, close-ups of the crosses, the bones. Even a hoodie that looked like it had dried blood on it Will told me to knock it off. But I didn't think much of it. I figured I'd post them later on a hiking subreddit, maybe as one of those found something weird in the woods type of threads. None of us were brave enough to go any deeper into the grove. There was a tree in the center, thicker, older, covered in what looked like carvings, and more bones nailed into the bark. We all just stood there staring at it. Then Jordan said, "We should go now." And without another word, we left. That should have been the end of it. But that night, after I got home, I posted 3 of the photos online. Nothing identifying, just the objects. Nothing with people or locations. A few hours later, after midnight, I got the first text. No words, just a photo. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was my driveway, taken from across the street. My car was in it, and the porch light was on. That photo had been taken minutes before I saw it. I looked outside immediately. Nothing, just darkness and silence. I didn't sleep that night. Every time a car passed or a branch moved outside, I'd get up and check the windows. I even turned off all the lights and sat on the couch with my phone in hand. Waiting, nothing else happened until 3:12 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the clock when the next text came through. Another photo. This time, it was closer, my front window. You could see the curtain half drawn, and behind it, the dropped. I ran to the window and flung it open, yelling into the night, but there was no one there. I checked every lock in the house, twice the next morning. I called Jordan. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I just asked if he'd noticed anything weird since the hike. He hesitated. Then he said he'd gotten a message too, but his was just a blank screen. No image, no text. Rachel and Will hadn't gotten anything, at least not yet. We all felt uneasy, like maybe we'd wandered into something we weren't supposed to see. I deleted the post and the photos immediately, but it felt too late. That day, I installed a security camera above my door. Even though I live in a decent neighborhood, it didn't make me feel any safer that night. I didn't get a text. I thought maybe it was over. But in the morning, when I checked the footage from the camera, there was a person at 2:47 a.m. Someone walked up to my front steps and just stood there for nearly 5 minutes. They never knocked, never rang the bell, just stood there. The footage was grainy, but I could see a hood, dark jeans, and what looked like something hanging from their neck. Maybe a necklace or a bone at one point. They turned and looked straight at the camera, but their face was completely obscured by shadow. I called the police, showed them the footage. They took a report, but nothing ever came of it. By the end of that week, Rachel texted us, saying her cat had gone missing. She was crying on the phone, said she found her back door open that morning, but she always locks it. She lives alone too, and now she won't stay in the house without her brother over. Will hasn't said much since he's not the type to show emotion, but he looked shaken last time we talked. He said he's been hearing things at night, branches breaking, soft knocking. We all agree on one thing. Whatever that place was, we shouldn't have touched it, shouldn't have photographed it, and we definitely shouldn't have posted it online. I started keeping the lights on at night, even in rooms I wasn't using. I felt watched constantly. Every time I took out the trash or went to my car, I'd feel like someone was just out of view. The text didn't stop, but they changed. No more photos, just single words. Repent, return, watch. Sometimes nothing at all, just the sound of the notification. At 2 or 3 in the morning, I stopped opening them. I changed my number, but it didn't matter. The messages kept coming from random, untraceable numbers. It was like they weren't meant to be replied to. Just reminders that someone was still out there. A few days later, I came home to find something nailed to the tree in my backyard. It was a small, crude wooden cross with what looked like feathers and string wrapped around it. I have no idea how someone got back there. I have a locked gate, and my backyard is fenced in all the way around. I called the police again, but like before, they just took the report and left that night. I slept in my car, parked 2 blocks over. I didn't want to be near the house. I didn't want whoever was doing this to know I was still there. Then one day, it just stopped. No more texts, no figures on the camera, no weird noises. Outside, the air around the house even felt different, lighter somehow. I never found out who sent the photos or who left that cross. None of us did. Jordan moved out of state. Rachel stopped hiking altogether. Will deleted every social media account he had. We don't really talk much anymore. I think we're all trying to forget it. Like ignoring it will make it go away for good. But I know better. I still think about that tree. Sometimes the carvings, the bones, the way it looked, like it had been used for years. I don't hike off trail anymore. Hell, I barely leave town, and every now and then, late at night, I'll think. I hear a soft knock somewhere in the house. I freeze every time. I never check. I don't want to know. That's the worst part. Not knowing what we saw, what we disturbed, or why it followed us. I've learned that some places are forgotten for a reason, and some things they don't want to stay buried. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska that barely shows up on a map. The kind of place where everyone knows your name and your family's business. I'm 28 now. But what happened when I was 14 still sticks to the back of my mind, like something unfinished. To back then, Halloween was the biggest thrill of the year. It wasn't about candy anymore. It was about messing with old Mr. Delvin. He lived in the weathered brick house at the edge of our road, right before the cornfield swallowed the pavement. He was in his 70s, always wore these high-waisted slacks with mustard stains on his undershirt, and hated kids, especially me and my brother Nate, every Halloween. It became a tradition. Us versus Delvin in 5th grade. We threw toilet paper all over his porch. 6th grade, we put a fake snake in his mailbox. By 8th grade, we were planting fake severed arms in his yard.